Throwaway account. Some people involved still live in my hometown, and I don't need this traced back to me. Also, English isn't my first language. Be kind. My leave started perfectly, and that should have been my first warning. After years of service, perfect feels suspicious. Silence doesn't feel like peace at first. It feels like something you forgot to check. But there I was, driving down a clean stretch of highway, the sun low but warm, the radio playing something slow and old, the kind of song that doesn't demand anything from you. For the first time in a long while, my hands weren't gripping the wheel like it might explode. My jaw wasn't clenched, my shoulders weren't touching my ears. 2 weeks at home. That was all I wanted. No uniform, no rank, no one calling my name like it was an order, no one needing me to be sharp, fast, lethal, or useful. Just me. I kept thinking about stupid normal things. A hot cup of coffee, my mother's kitchen, sleeping without boots next to the bed, civilian problems, civilian thoughts. I wanted to remember what it felt like to be an ordinary woman, not a role, not a function, not a symbol. That's why I was dressed the way I was. Jeans, sneakers, a simple jacket, hair loose, no makeup except what I'd thrown on automatically, no posture, no edge, no don't mess with me energy. I wanted to blend in. I wanted to pass as forgettable, invisible. I didn't want anyone to look at me and see anything other than some woman driving home. Before service, I was very visible in all the wrong ways. People thought my silence was an invitation. My calm was read as consent. I was talked over, laughed at, commented on. Family friends felt entitled to my body and my time. Men I trusted thought no was a suggestion. I learned early that humiliation doesn't always arrive as violence. Sometimes it shows up as jokes everyone else laughs at, while you swallow your pride and tell yourself it's not worth making a scene. I didn't fight back then. I endured. I thought endurance was strength. Service taught me the difference. But that's not what this chapter is about. This chapter is about how badly I wanted none of that to matter anymore. The gas station appeared at exactly the right moment, like the universe was being generous for once. I pulled in, parked, stepped out of the car, and stretched. The smell hit me immediately. Fuel, hot asphalt, cheap coffee, normal, boring, safe. Inside, I paid, filled up the tank, picked up my coffee, and felt grounded. No alarms going off in my head, no sense of danger, just a woman buying caffeine on her way home. I walked back outside, keys in hand, thinking about nothing important. That's when the sound hit. Engines. Loud. Aggressive. Too close. My body reacted before my brain did. My spine straightened. My breath changed. My fingers tightened slightly around the cup. Old instincts. Unwanted, but reliable. Switching on without permission. I hadn't even turned around yet. I told myself I was overreacting. That I wasn't there anymore. That I was home now. That this was just noise. Just men. Just bikes. Just another place on the road. I opened my car door and set my coffee inside. Then I heard laughter. The kind that isn't happy. The kind that's territorial. I closed the door slowly and finally looked back. That was when I understood. My leave hadn't really started yet. And it was about to remind me exactly why. I wish I could say I immediately clocked every detail. That I assessed the threat cleanly, calmly, like people imagine you do after service. That's not how it works. At first, it was just sound. Loud enough to vibrate in your chest. Engines revving not because they needed to, but because someone wanted to be noticed. One motorcycle, then another, then another. The kind of noise that pushes everything else out of the air. Conversation, thought, choice. I stood there with my keys in my hand and my coffee cooling on the roof of my car, watching them roll in. About 20 bikes. Maybe a few more. Leather jackets with patches stitched on like badges of honor. Helmets dangling from handlebars. Beer bottles already open. Foam spilling onto the concrete. They parked however they wanted, blocking pumps, cutting off lanes, claiming space without asking. Men spilled off the bikes like the place belonged to them, laughing, shouting, slapping each other on the back. They weren't in a hurry. They weren't passing through. They were announcing themselves. I felt the familiar tightening behind my ribs, not fear, not yet, but awareness. The kind that makes you start counting without meaning to. How many? How close? Where the exits are? Who's watching and who isn't? I hated that part of myself for waking up. I didn't want to be alert. I wanted to be stupid and relaxed and half asleep like everyone else. I wanted to be the woman I was pretending to be, the one who could ignore noise and go about her business. So I did exactly that. I picked up my coffee, adjusted my jacket, and walked calmly toward my car. I didn't look at them. I didn't flinch when one of them revved his engine harder as I passed. I didn't react to the whistles, the laughter that shifted slightly in tone once they noticed me. That's something people don't talk about enough. The moment a group like that clocks you, you can feel it before you hear anything. The air changes, the sound sharpens, the attention lands on you like a hand. I kept walking. Before service, that would have been my strategy too. Don't engage, don't escalate, don't give them anything. If you pretend not to hear, maybe they'll get bored. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Behind me, the laughter got louder. One of them said something I didn't catch, and the rest responded like a chorus. I heard the scrape of boots on concrete, the clink of glass hitting the ground. Still, I didn't turn around. I told myself this wasn't my problem. I was leaving. I was already done here. I wasn't responsible for managing the behavior of grown men who thought intimidation was entertainment. My hand was on the door handle when the first voice cut through the noise. Hey, beautiful. There it was. Not shouted, not aggressive, casual, confident, the kind of tone that assumes compliance before you've even answered. I paused for half a second, not because I was scared, but because I was tired. Bone tired. The kind of tired that sinks into your joints and makes you wonder how many times in one lifetime you're expected to deal with the same bullshit in different packaging. I didn't turn around. Another voice joined in, closer this time. Where you rushing off to? You can spare a minute. I opened my car door. Something in them shifted then. You could hear it. Irritation creeping in where entitlement used to be comfortable. Silence, especially from women, doesn't read as neutrality to men like that. It reads as disrespect. I set my coffee inside, closed the door gently, and finally turned just enough to acknowledge the space behind me without fully facing them. That's when I really saw them. Not just bikers, not just noise. Faces flushed with alcohol and confidence. Eyes tracking me openly, weighing, judging. One of them leaned against his bike like he was posing for an imaginary audience. Another took a long drink and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, never breaking eye contact. I felt something old stir in my chest, not panic, not rage, but a memory of every time I'd been made to feel small for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Before service, I would have shrunk. Before service, I would have apologized for nothing. I didn't now. I met their gaze briefly, then looked away again, as if they were irrelevant. Because to me, they were. That was my mistake. Because humiliation, I've learned, isn't always about power. Sometimes it's about wounded ego. And wounded egos make the most noise. Behind me, someone laughed again, sharper this time. Damn, one of them said. Did you see that? She thinks she's too good. That was the moment I knew this wasn't going to end quietly. I exhaled slowly, closed my eyes for just a second, and wished, really wished, that I could rewind 10 minutes and drive past this place without stopping. But the road doesn't rewind, and neither do people like them. By the time I turned back fully, I already knew the next words were coming. I just didn't know how ugly they were going to be. The first real insult didn't come as a shout. It never does. It came wrapped in something almost polite, almost playful, like a test balloon floated into the air to see how much it could get away with. "Hey, beautiful," the same voice said again, closer now. I didn't turn fully. I didn't smile. I didn't apologize. I just stood there with my hand resting on the car door, my body angled slightly away, signaling, clearly, deliberately, that this conversation did not exist for me. Silence is dangerous to men like that. Behind me, boots scraped across the concrete. Someone moved into my peripheral vision, close enough that I could smell beer on his breath even without facing him. "Didn't hear me?" he added, still casual, still smiling. "That's rude." There it was, the shift. The moment where their friendliness curdles into accusation, where their choice to bother you becomes your fault for not responding correctly. I turned just enough to be heard. "No, thank you." 2 words. Calm. Neutral. No emotion attached. That should have been the end of it. For a normal person, it would have been. For him, it was an insult. A few of the others laughed. Not loudly, not yet, but enough to let him know he had an audience, enough to turn a private rejection into a public challenge. He tilted his head, pretending to consider my answer. "No? Thank you?" he repeated, amused. "What? You in a hurry or something?" "I have my own plans," I said. "I need to leave." Still calm, still even. I could hear my own voice the way you hear it through a headset. Steady, controlled, detached. I wasn't performing strength. I was conserving energy. Another one chimed in from behind him. "Aw, come on. We won't bite." Laughter this time, louder, encouraged. I turned a little more, enough to make eye contact. I wanted them to hear me clearly. "I don't have time to listen to you," I said. "Move." That word, move, landed harder than I expected. His smile dropped, just slightly. Not gone, but cracked. He straightened up, chest puffing out, posture changing from relaxed to territorial. He didn't like being spoken to like that, especially not by someone he had already decided was beneath him. "You should learn some manners," he said. "It's not very smart to refuse nice people like us." Nice. I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded once, as if acknowledging information I already knew was useless. "I've been clear," I replied. "I'm leaving." I turned back toward my car. That's when he touched me. Not a grab at first, not openly violent. Just fingers closing around my arm, tight enough to stop me from moving forward. Confident. Familiar. Like he'd done this before and expected the same result he always got. That was the exact moment the world narrowed. People ask what it feels like when training kicks in. They expect something cinematic, adrenaline, rage, fear. It's none of that. It's quiet. My heartbeat slowed, my breathing settled, my mind emptied of everything unnecessary. There was no panic, no hesitation, no inner debate about whether I was allowed to react. I didn't pull away immediately. I turned my head and looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked back at his face. "I said no," I told him quietly. His grip tightened. Around us, the noise dipped. The others were watching now, fully engaged. This wasn't flirting anymore. This was entertainment. He leaned in slightly, breath hot with alcohol. "You think you're special or something?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because the moment someone puts their hands on you after you've said no, the conversation is over. There's no misunderstanding left to clear up, no social rules to tiptoe around, just facts. And the fact was, he thought I was weak. He thought my calm meant compliance. Before service, that assumption would have crushed me. I would have frozen, apologized, tried to talk my way out of it while my body betrayed me with fear. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I let my shoulder relax. I shifted my weight. 1 second. Less than that. He never even saw it coming. There's a moment right before violence that feels suspended, like the air itself is holding its breath. That's where we were. His hand was still wrapped around my arm, not shaking, not unsure, firm in that lazy, practiced way of someone who has never been punished for crossing lines. His thumb pressed into the inside of my wrist, not painful yet, but deliberate, a reminder that he believed he controlled what happened next. I could feel every eye on us. The laughter had stopped, not because they disapproved, but because they were waiting, watching. This was the part they enjoyed most, the shift from words to pressure, from discomfort to fear. They wanted to see which one of us would break first. He leaned in closer, invading what little space I had left. I could smell him clearly now: beer, sweat, gasoline, confidence fermented into something sour. "I insist," he said softly, like he was doing me a favor. That word hit harder than the grip. Not ask, not want. Insist. As if my consent was a formality he could skip once he decided he deserved something from me. As if my body was a problem to be negotiated, not a boundary to be respected. Before service, that word would have hollowed me out. I would have felt the familiar panic rise, the old fear of escalation, of being blamed, of being told later that I should have just been nicer. I would have scanned faces for help and found none. I would have calculated how to leave without making things worse. Instead, my mind went very clear. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't struggle. I didn't perform fear for them. I looked at him the way you look at a problem you've already solved. "You're making a mistake," I said. That was it. No threats, no insults, just a statement of fact. He laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound loud enough for the others to hear. "Is that right?" he said. "You gonna scream now? Or cry?" A couple of them snorted. Someone muttered something I couldn't quite catch, but the tone was enough. Amused, expectant. I felt anger then, not hot, not explosive, but heavy and controlled. The kind that sits low in your gut and makes you very precise. Anger not just for myself, but for every version of me that had stood in places like this before, swallowing humiliation because it was safer than resisting. He tightened his grip again, just a little, testing, escalating. "You should relax," he said. "We're just having fun." Fun. I shifted my stance slightly. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to put my weight where I wanted it. Just enough to feel the ground properly beneath my feet. I met his eyes. "Let go," I said. That was when his expression changed. Not fear, not yet. Annoyance. The kind that comes when someone refuses to play their assigned role. When a woman doesn't flinch, doesn't plead, doesn't soften herself to make the situation easier for everyone else. He straightened, puffed out his chest, and glanced briefly at his friends. I saw it happen. That quick look for approval, for backup, for reassurance that he was still the one in control. He got it. A few of them nodded. One smiled. Another took a step closer. That sealed it. He turned back to me, jaw tight now. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he said. "You're alone. You don't get to give orders." I didn't respond immediately. I was busy noticing details. The way his wrist was angled, the distance between his feet, the fact that his balance was lazy, overconfident. The way his friends had clustered just far enough away to watch, but not close enough to intervene if things went wrong. He was counting on numbers. I was counting on physics. "I'm not giving you orders," I said finally. "I'm telling you what happens next." That got another laugh, louder this time. One of the men behind him clapped slowly, mockingly. "Oh," someone said. "Hear that? She's serious." He leaned in again, close enough that I could see the blood vessels in his eyes. "What happens next," he said, voice low, "is you stop acting like a bitch and come talk to us properly." There it was. The mask fully off. The insult wasn't even original. It rarely is. It was just the final justification, the word men like him use to convince themselves that whatever they do next is earned. I felt something settle into place inside me. Acceptance, not surrender, clarity. I wasn't going to talk my way out of this. I wasn't going to be rescued by bystanders. No one was stepping in. No authority was coming to save me. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was a choice, his, and now, mine. I took one slow breath, and then I moved. People think violence is loud. They imagine shouting, chaos, flailing limbs, panic everywhere. They imagine rage exploding out of nowhere, like something uncontrollable. That's not how it felt. It felt like time narrowed into a thin, clean line. 1 second. That's all it took. I didn't yank my arm away. I didn't announce anything. I didn't give him the courtesy of anticipation. My body moved before my thoughts had time to narrate it, before fear or doubt could interfere. I rotated my wrist inward, following the direction of his grip instead of fighting it. His fingers loosened automatically, reflex, not choice. And in that fraction of a moment, I stepped closer, not back. People never expect that. They expect retreat. My elbow came up sharply, not wide, not dramatic, compact, precise. It caught him just under the jawline, snapping his head sideways before his brain registered pain. He gasped. I didn't pause. My other hand locked around his wrist, twisted hard, and stepped past him, forcing his arm into a position it was never meant to be in. I felt the joint protest under my grip. Not broken, not yet, but close enough that his body understood the threat, even if his mind didn't. He made a sound then. Not a scream. More like surprise choking on itself. I drove my knee up, controlled, exactly where it needed to land. He folded instantly, breath leaving him in a sharp, humiliating rush. His forehead bumped against my shoulder as he collapsed forward, suddenly very heavy and very fragile. The entire sequence took less than a second. The silence afterward was deafening. He hit the ground on his knees first, hands scrambling uselessly at the concrete. Then his side. He curled in on himself, gasping, eyes wide and unfocused, mouth opening and closing like he was trying to remember how breathing worked. I stepped back and released his wrist. He didn't try to stand. He couldn't. For a moment, no one spoke. 20 men who had been loud, confident, territorial just seconds earlier now stood frozen, staring at the body on the ground like it didn't belong to them anymore, like it was a malfunction, a glitch in the script. Someone let out a low whistle. Another muttered, "What the hell?" I felt nothing dramatic. No rush, no triumph, just awareness. I knelt down slowly, deliberately, close enough that only he could hear me. He was shaking now, coughing, trying to drag air into lungs that refused to cooperate. "I told you," I said quietly, my voice steady, almost bored, "that I had things to do." He tried to speak. It came out as a wet rasp. I leaned a little closer. "What exactly?" I asked. "Wasn't clear?" His eyes met mine then, and something changed in them. Not pain, not anger. Recognition. The sudden understanding that he had made a catastrophic miscalculation. That this wasn't a drunk girl panicking. That this wasn't a bluff. That the world he understood, where intimidation worked, where numbers guaranteed safety, where women folded, had just failed him in the most public way possible. I stood up. Around us, the spell broke. "Hey!" someone shouted. "What the fuck did you do?" Another voice. "You crazy bitch!" There it was. The panic. Finally. The noise rushing back in, messy and uncontrolled. A few of them took half steps forward, unsure. One reached for his phone. Another looked around, as if expecting authority to materialize out of thin air. I straightened my jacket. I didn't run. I didn't rush. I didn't look shaken. I looked exactly like what I was. A woman who had finished a task. "Touching people after they say no has consequences," I said, loud enough for all of them to hear. "You just watched one." The man on the ground groaned, rolling onto his side. Someone bent toward him, then hesitated, like they were afraid he might break further if they touched him. I stepped back, toward my car. That was when the real anger hit them. Not at me, not yet. At him. Because in their world, nothing is more humiliating than being the reason the group looks weak. He hadn't just lost a fight. He'd embarrassed them, exposed them, shown that numbers don't mean shit when confidence replaces skill. I saw it in their faces. This wasn't over. Not even close. As I reached for my door handle, engines revved again. Louder this time, harsher. Bikes shifted positions. Tires scraped against concrete. They weren't laughing anymore. They were closing in. And I knew then that what happened next wouldn't be about ego or flirting or posturing. It would be about control. And this time, they would try to take it back. The first sound wasn't shouting. It was an engine. One bike revved hard, sharp and aggressive, like a warning shot. Then another answered. Then two more. The noise stacked on itself, vibrating through the concrete and straight into my bones. The silence I'd created shattered all at once, replaced by something ugly and chaotic. "Are you just going to stand there?" The man on the ground wheezed, his voice cracked and desperate. He wasn't yelling at me. He was yelling at them. That was the moment everything shifted. Before, this had been about me, about entitlement, humiliation, a woman refusing to play along. Now it was about him, about his status, about the fact that 20 men had just watched one of their own get dropped in seconds by someone they'd already decided was harmless. I turned slowly, still standing near my car, and looked at him. He was on his knees, one hand pressed awkwardly between his legs, the other braced on the ground. His face was red, eyes watering, jaw slack with shock. He looked smaller now. Not physically, emotionally. Reduced. I straightened fully. "Are you begging?" I asked, not loudly, not mockingly, just curious. "In front of your friends?" A ripple went through the group. Uneasy, sharp. Someone laughed, too fast, too forced, trying to break the tension. "Shut up," another muttered. "Just get up, man." But he couldn't. And everyone could see it. He looked up at them again, panic creeping in. "You saw what she did. Are you gonna let her talk like that?" That word again. Let. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I took a step closer, just one, making sure everyone could hear me. "This," I said, gesturing at him, "is what happens when a grown man needs an audience to feel strong." A few of them bristled. One stepped forward, fists clenched. Another shook his head like he was trying to reset reality. "You don't know who you're talking to," someone snapped. I nodded slowly. "You're right," I said. "I don't. And that's the problem." I glanced down at the man still struggling to breathe. "You had numbers," I continued. "You had noise. You had confidence borrowed from alcohol and friends. And the second none of that worked, you started crying for help." He tried to lunge toward me. His body betrayed him. He collapsed again, gasping, a pathetic sound tearing out of his chest. I didn't flinch. "The shame of your country," I said quietly. "Begging a group of men to protect you from a woman. That did it." Someone swore loudly. Another kicked his bike in frustration. The group fractured into motion, half of them angry at me, half of them furious at him for embarrassing them. That's the thing about fragile masculinity. It eats its own when exposed. One of them pointed at me. "You think you're untouchable now?" I met his gaze calmly. "No," I said. "I think you're predictable." I turned away. That decision enraged them more than anything else I could have done. Not running, not shouting, just leaving. Like they didn't matter. I opened my car door and got in. Behind me, voices rose all at once. "Don't let her go! Block her in! Teach her a lesson!" The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Familiar, grounding. Through the windshield, I watched motorcycles move. Not randomly, deliberately. One rolled in front of my car. Another pulled in behind. Two more angled in from the side, cutting off the exit. Tires screeched. Engines snarled. The space tightened like a fist. My heart rate didn't spike. That surprised me. I set my coffee in the cup holder. It was cold now. Outside, one of them banged his palm against my window. Hard. Once. Twice. "Get out of the car!" he shouted. "You think this is over?" I stared straight ahead, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. Inside, something old and familiar settled into place. Not fear, not bravado. Acceptance. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This wasn't about bruised egos or posturing. This was escalation. They had lost face, and now they wanted it back. Not through words, through dominance. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. There was one number I didn't have to think about. I typed fast. "Gas station on the highway. I need help. Now." I hit send. Another knock on the window. Louder this time. Someone laughed. High, sharp, nervous. "You're trapped," a voice said. "Might as well come out and apologize." I didn't look at them. I checked my mirrors. Counted. Measured distances automatically, like my body was running calculations my mind didn't need to verbalize. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They thought they had me surrounded. They had no idea how badly they were wrong. And somewhere down the road, engines I trusted were already moving. They just didn't know it yet. From inside the car, everything sounded different. The engines weren't just loud anymore. They were distorted, muffled by glass and metal, like an animal growling with its mouth full. Vibrations traveled through the steering wheel, up my arms, into my chest. The car rocked slightly as someone leaned against it, testing, probing. I didn't turn my head. That was important. Fear feeds on eye contact. So does ego. I wasn't giving them either. Motorcycles moved again. Slowly this time. Carefully. They weren't just blocking the exit anymore. They were tightening the space. Front, back, both sides. A circle, imperfect but effective. Close enough that if I opened the door, I'd hit a bike. Close enough that the message was unmistakable. "You're not leaving." I checked my mirrors without moving my head too much. Counted again. Front wheel distance, rear clearance, angle of approach. Too many variables. Too many bodies. If I tried to force my way out, someone would get hurt. Maybe me, maybe them. And that wasn't the goal. Outside, the tone had shifted. This wasn't shouting anymore. This was coordination pretending to be chaos. "Watch the back. Don't let her turn. She's not going anywhere." They thought they were in control again. That familiar comfort settling back into their voices. Men like that don't need plans. They just need to feel surrounded. Someone leaned down toward my window. I could see his reflection in the glass, distorted and warped. "You really fucked up," he said, tapping the window with 2 fingers. Not hard. Not yet. "You embarrassed him." I said nothing. "You think anyone's coming?" Another voice added from somewhere behind. "Out here?" I almost smiled. Almost. Instead, I rested my hands loosely on the wheel and focused on my breathing. Slow. Controlled. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. I felt the old calm settle in. The one people mistake for fearlessness, when really it's familiarity. I'd been in tighter circles than this. Louder ones. Deadlier ones. This was intimidation, not combat. That didn't make it harmless. Someone kicked the side of my car. Not hard enough to dent it, just hard enough to make a point. The sound echoed inside the cabin like a gunshot. "Get out!" a voice ordered. "We just want to talk." There it was again. Just talk. I thought about all the times before service when I'd been told that. How talking always seemed to require me standing still while someone else decided how far things would go. How compliance was framed as maturity and resistance as drama. Not today. I adjusted my seat slightly and reached down, deliberately, into the center console. Not to grab anything threatening, there was nothing there, but to remind myself where everything was. Space, weight, balance, control. Outside, impatience crept in. She's ignoring us. Smash the window. No, not yet. Don't be stupid. The disagreement was subtle, but I caught it. The group wasn't unified anymore. Stress does that. So does uncertainty. They hadn't planned for this part. The part where the woman doesn't cry, doesn't beg, doesn't escalate or collapse. The part where the script runs out. I lifted my phone again and checked the screen. No response yet. That was fine. I didn't need reassurance. I just needed time. Another man approached, carrying something in his hand. A bat. Not a big one, more symbolic than practical. He rested it casually against his shoulder, like he was auditioning for a role. "This is your last chance," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Open the door, say sorry, and maybe we let you leave." Maybe. I finally turned my head then, just enough to look at him through the glass. Our eyes met. I made sure my expression was neutral, not defiant, not scared, tired. I shook my head once. "No," I said. The word felt solid, heavy, final. His smile vanished. "All right," he said, stepping back. "Your choice." They moved closer, hands pressed against the hood, against the trunk, against the sides. The car shifted again, more noticeably this time. Not flipped, not yet, but rocked, testing how far they could push without consequences. "Open it." "You're done." "Count to 3. I stared straight ahead, jaw set, pulse steady. This was the edge, the point where intimidation turns into something harder to walk back from, where mistakes get made. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Then, faintly, almost imperceptible at first, I felt it. A different vibration, not coming from them, from the road. Low, heavy, rhythmic. Diesel engines. I didn't react, didn't look, didn't give anything away. But my breathing eased just a fraction. Outside, someone paused, mid-shout. Another tilted his head. "What the hell is that?" someone muttered. The bat lowered slightly. The ground trembled again, stronger now, closer. Confusion rippled through the circle. Heads turned, attention fractured. The rocking stopped as they looked toward the road in unison. I allowed myself one small, silent exhale. They still thought I was surrounded. They didn't realize the circle was about to break. And when it did, everything they thought they understood about me, about power, about humiliation, about who gets to walk away, was going to collapse all at once. The first thing that changed was the sound. Not the engines around me. Those were still snarling, impatient. But the tone of the space. The kind of shift you feel more than hear. Like a pressure drop before a storm hits. The men noticed it too. Someone stopped rocking the car. Another stepped back from the hood, squinting toward the road. The bat lowered a few inches, no longer theatrical, now uncertain. "What the hell is that?" one of them asked. I stayed still. Waiting is a skill people underestimate. They think it's passive. It's not. Waiting is active restraint. It's choosing not to react before the moment is right. It's knowing that time can be a weapon if you let it work for you. I'd learned that the hard way. Outside, confusion started spreading faster than anger. The circle loosened just a bit, not enough to escape, but enough to break their rhythm. Their voices overlapped now, no longer coordinated. "Probably just trucks." "No, that's not trucks." "Why are they slowing down?" Another vibration rolled through the ground, heavier this time, closer, the kind of weight that doesn't apologize for existing. The man with the bat cleared his throat, trying to reclaim authority. "Doesn't matter," he said. "She's not going anywhere." He stepped forward and raised the bat again, this time with intent. "I'll smash the window," he announced. "Last chance." He lifted it over his shoulder. Inside the car, everything felt very small and very contained. The windshield framed the world like a narrow screen. I could see his hands tighten around the handle, his knuckles whitening. I could see the reflection of his face in the glass. Tense, uncertain, angry. I thought about the first time someone had threatened me like that, years ago. Different place, different face. Same certainty that I would fold. I hadn't then. I wasn't about to now. I didn't raise my hands. I didn't plead. I didn't unlock the door. I looked straight ahead and said nothing. The bat hovered in the air. Behind him, someone grabbed his arm. "Wait!" "What?" he snapped. "You scared now?" "No," the other man said slowly. "Listen." They all did. The sound was unmistakable now. Multiple engines, diesel, heavy suspension, not revving, not showing off, just moving with purpose. Tires crunching gravel as they turned in, brakes hissing, doors slamming in sequence, military cadence. I saw it register on their faces one by one, the bravado draining, replaced by calculation. Then fear. A voice somewhere behind me went quiet, mid-sentence. Another whispered, "That's not cops." The bat dropped slightly. Then headlights flooded the gas station. Not cars, not bikes. Humvees. 1, 2, 3, then more. They rolled in fast and decisive, cutting off every exit the bikers had tried to control. Engines idled low and steady, like predators that didn't need to rush. Doors opened almost simultaneously. Boots hit the ground. Real boots. Not decorative, not for show. The circle collapsed instantly. Men who had been shouting seconds ago stepped back like they'd been burned. One dropped his bottle. Another raised his hands without being told. Someone swore under his breath, panic bleeding through the words. I recognized the formation before I saw faces, the spacing, the angles, the way weapons stayed pointed down but ready. Controlled force. Relief didn't wash over me. Something steadier did. Familiarity. A figure moved into my line of sight, tall, relaxed, smiling like he'd just walked into a boring meeting. He glanced at the bikes, then at the men standing frozen between them. "Well," he said calmly, "this looks messy." He turned his head slightly, eyes finding my windshield. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded once. That was all. He turned back to the group, smile gone now, voice still conversational, but carrying weight. "All right," he said. "Everyone stay exactly where you are." No one argued. They didn't need to. The men who had surrounded me looked smaller now, not because the soldiers were loud, they weren't, but because authority doesn't need volume. It just needs certainty. One of the bikers swallowed hard. Another backed into his own bike and nearly tripped. I unlocked the door and stepped out of the car. The night air felt cooler, cleaner. I stood straight, brushed imaginary dust from my jacket, and walked forward. Calm, unhurried. Like this had always been the plan. The man with the bat stared at me, mouth slightly open. "You," he started. I didn't look at him. I looked at the one who had grabbed my arm earlier. He was standing off to the side now, pale, eyes darting between uniforms and insignia, finally seeing what he'd failed to recognize before. I met his gaze. The horror there was almost impressive. Not because he was afraid of the soldiers, but because he was beginning to understand who I was, and how badly he had misjudged me. This wasn't the end yet, but the balance of power had shifted so completely that there was no going back. They had wanted to humiliate me. Instead, they were about to learn what it feels like to be exposed, and I was going to make sure they remembered it. People talk about power like it's loud, like it announces itself with shouting, threats, weapons raised high. That's what the bikers believed power looked like. Noise, numbers, intimidation. They were wrong. The Humvees didn't roar in. They arrived, one after another, clean, deliberate, cutting off every angle the bikers had so carefully claimed minutes earlier. The engines idled low, steady, almost bored. No revving, no drama. 10 of them. I counted automatically. Couldn't help it. 10 vehicles, fully loaded, perfect spacing, Doors opening in sequence, not chaos. Soldiers stepping out like they'd rehearsed this exact moment 1,000 times. Because they had. Just not here. Boots hit the ground. That sound did something to the air. It flattened it, pressed it down. The bikers felt it immediately. You could see it in their bodies before their faces caught up. Shoulders slumping, chests deflating. Men who had been blocking exits with confidence suddenly realizing there were no exits left at all. One of them whispered, "Shit." Another dropped his bat. It clattered against the concrete and rolled to a stop at my feet. No one bent to pick it up. A man stepped forward from the nearest vehicle, tall, relaxed, hands visible, no rush in his movements. He looked at the scene like someone assessing a minor inconvenience, not a threat. "All right," he said calmly, his voice carrying without effort. "Nobody move." Nobody did. I recognized him then. Not just his face, but the way he stood. The way his attention moved without his head needing to. The way he smiled like nothing here surprised him. He glanced at me again. "You good?" "Yes," I said. Just that. No shaking, no tears, no explanation. He nodded once, satisfied. Then he turned back to the bikers, and that's when things really fell apart. "You," he said, pointing casually at the man who'd grabbed my arm. "Hands where I can see them." The man froze for half a second too long, then lifted his hands quickly, palms out, eyes wide. We were just—" "Stop," the soldier said, still calm. "You don't get to talk yet." The silence that followed was brutal. Another soldier approached the man I'd dropped earlier, the one now sitting on the ground, pale, still cradling himself. He crouched briefly, checked him with professional detachment. "He'll live," he said. "Pride won't." A few of the bikers flinched. That hurt more than threats ever could. I stepped forward then, not because I was ordered to, not because I needed permission, because I wanted to. The gravel crunched softly under my shoes as I walked past the line of soldiers and stopped in front of the group. 20 men who had felt enormous minutes ago now looked like boys caught doing something they couldn't explain. I pointed at two of them. "You," I said, my voice level. "And you?" They stiffened. "The rest of you," I continued, "can leave." Confusion rippled through them instantly. "What? Are you serious?" "Just like that?" One of them laughed nervously. "You can't be serious. He started it." I looked at him. "No," I said. "He escalated it. And you all supported him until it stopped being fun." Silence. I turned slightly toward the soldiers. "I don't want charges," I said. "I don't want paperwork. I don't want anyone touched." The man who'd arrived first studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Your call." That alone broke something in the bikers. Authority didn't argue with me. It deferred. The rest of them stared as if trying to rewrite what they were seeing. "Go," I said again. "Now." They didn't hesitate this time. Engines started, rushed, uneven, sloppy. Bikes peeled away in small groups, not the confident pack they'd arrived as. No one looked back. No one said a word. They abandoned their own without discussion. The two men I'd singled out stayed frozen where they stood. One of them swallowed hard. "We're sorry," he blurted. "We didn't know—" I held up my hand. "That's the point," I said. "You didn't bother to know." I stepped closer. Not threatening, just close enough that they had to look at me. "You thought noise was power," I continued. "You thought numbers made you safe. You thought a woman alone meant permission." Their faces drained of color as the realization settled. I gestured vaguely around us. "This," I said, "is what happens when you mistake intimidation for strength." They nodded frantically now, apologizing, talking over each other, promising anything. I wasn't listening. "I don't need your apologies," I said. "I just wanted you to see it." "See what?" one of them whispered. I looked at the empty road where their friends had vanished. "How quickly you were discarded," I said. "Like nothing." That landed harder than any blow. I stepped back, turned away, and walked toward my car. Behind me, no one followed. No one spoke. I got in, closed the door, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the gas station, past the Humvees, past the soldiers who nodded once in acknowledgement, my coffee still sat untouched in the cup holder. Cold. I took a sip anyway. It tasted exactly like clarity. And I knew, without any doubt, that the lesson they'd learned tonight would stay with them far longer than any bruise. Because humiliation fades. Understanding doesn't. I didn't drive fast. That surprised me too. The road opened up in front of me, empty and dark. The gas station shrinking in the rearview mirror until it was just a smear of light against the night. No bikes followed. No headlights chased me. No engines roared behind me demanding the ending they thought they were owed. Just asphalt, lines, distance. My hands were steady on the wheel. My breathing was even. My heart wasn't racing the way people expect it to after something like that. If anything, I felt hollowed out, like something heavy I'd been carrying without noticing had finally been set down. Only then did the emotions start to leak in. Not fear, not relief. Anger, delayed, controlled, sharp around the edges. I thought about how close it had been, how easily that situation could have ended differently if I hadn't changed. If I'd still been the girl who smiled to survive. If I'd still believed that staying quiet was safer than setting boundaries. If I hadn't learned, very deliberately and painfully, what my body was capable of when my mind stopped negotiating. The realization sat in my chest like a weight. Back then, before service, I would have gone home shaking. I would have replayed every word I said, wondering how I could have been nicer, quieter, smaller. I would have blamed myself for attracting attention, for stopping at the wrong place, for existing in the wrong body. Tonight, none of that happened. What I felt instead was grief. Not for myself, for the version of me that never had backup, never had tools, never had the right to be taken seriously. The version that learned humiliation before she learned confidence. I pulled over at the next rest stop and shut the engine off. The silence hit differently now. I leaned back in the seat and finally let my shoulders drop. My fingers trembled just a little when I wrapped them around the steering wheel again, not from fear, but from the release of tension my body had been holding on to since the first engine revved behind me. This is the part people don't see. Strength isn't being unaffected. Strength is functioning through the impact, and then allowing yourself to feel it later, when it's safe. I checked my phone. Messages had come in. "You okay? We're here if you need anything. Call when you're settled." I typed back one line. "I'm fine. Thank you." And I meant it. By the time I got back on the road, the anger had softened into something more reflective. Not forgiveness, not even close, but understanding. Those men didn't matter individually. They were interchangeable. Their behavior wasn't personal. It was structural, predictable, taught, reinforced. What mattered was the choice I'd made. I didn't escalate to prove dominance. I didn't shrink to preserve peace. I didn't seek revenge. I chose control. That felt important. When I finally pulled into my family's driveway hours later, the house was dark and quiet. Exactly what I'd wanted when this leave started. I sat in the car for a moment, engine off, listening to the tick of cooling metal. I caught my reflection in the windshield. Same face, same clothes, different woman. Service didn't make me violent. It didn't make me cruel. It didn't strip me of softness. It taught me boundaries. And what happens when they're crossed. I grabbed my bag, locked the car, and walked toward the door. Tomorrow, I'd hug my family, drink fresh coffee, pretend this was just another long drive home. But tonight, alone with my thoughts, I understood something clearly for the first time. Humiliation only works on you if you agree to carry it. and I was done carrying other people's shame. One chapter left. I didn't tell my family what happened, not because I was ashamed, not because I was protecting anyone, but because I didn't want that moment to become a story about fear instead of a lesson about boundaries. Some things don't need an audience to be real. The next morning, I woke up in my childhood bed, sunlight leaking through familiar curtains, the smell of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. My mother was humming softly. My father was already outside, doing something unnecessary but comforting, like checking a fence that didn't need checking. Normal life. That contrast hit harder than anything that happened the night before. Because here's the part no one warns you about after service. You don't come home weaker. You come home different. And people don't always know what to do with that. Some try to test it. Some try to poke at it. Some try to put you back in the box you used to fit in. Humiliation is one of the tools they use. Before service, humiliation worked on me because I internalized it. I believed it said something about my worth. I believed staying quiet was the price of safety. I believed that if I endured enough, eventually people would stop. They don't. They just get bolder. What changed wasn't my ability to hurt someone. It was my refusal to accept responsibility for other people's behavior. It was understanding that being nice and being safe are not the same thing. That calm doesn't mean weak, and silence doesn't mean consent. The men at that gas station didn't know who I was. And that's the point. They didn't need to. My strength didn't come from a uniform, a rank, or 10 Humvees showing up at the right moment, even though I won't pretend that backup didn't matter. Strength came from clarity, from knowing exactly where my boundaries were and being willing to enforce them without theatrics. They wanted to humiliate me. Instead, they were confronted with something far worse: irrelevance. They learned that intimidation fails when it meets someone who isn't trying to win, prove, or please. Someone who isn't impressed by noise. Someone who doesn't confuse attention with power. If you're reading this because something similar happened to you, before service, after service, or with no service involved at all, here's what I wish someone had told me earlier. You are not required to be agreeable, to be safe. You are not responsible for managing someone else's ego. And you do not owe politeness to people who ignore your boundaries. Humiliation loses its grip the moment you stop carrying it home with you. I'm not fearless. I'm not invincible. I don't go looking for conflict. And I don't believe violence is a solution. But I am done shrinking. And if there's one thing service gave me that no one can take away, it's this: the certainty that I am allowed to take up space, calmly, firmly, without apology. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and never confuse silence with strength again.